Hi, I'm Dr. Bob Wright, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this segment. It is called Minimizing the Negative. It is from Chapter 5, Engage, in Judith's and my book, The Heart of the Fight. And one of the reasons I'm introducing this is because this was yet another fight that I lost with Judith. I fought vehemently that accentuating the positive, which is the first rule of engagement, and minimizing the negative were superficial, meaningless, lightweight guilt trips that parents and grandparents and teachers used on us kids. I was wrong. Judith, however, had to prove to me I was wrong with many different types of research. So, since I'm way behind in accentuating the positive, which is the first rule of engagement, and the second rule, minimizing the negative, and I am truly working hard to learn this, because as a manager, I tended to just tell people what was wrong and expect them to fix it. And I've had to work very hard to learn how to accentuate the positive and minimize the negative. She'll tell you about the ratios, she'll tell you about how much is enough, and she'll tell you about how these two phases of engagement, accentuating the positive and minimizing the negative, are necessary to create a firm foundation for successful, creative, proper conflict resolution that allows us to learn and grow and become our best selves.
Real relationships require real engagement. And in order to really engage, we need some rules of engagement. And each of the rules we'll share in different episodes are really helpful in navigating the sometimes rocky waters of relationships with other people. Whether it's with your loved one, a partner in a committed relationship, someone you're dating, your friends, a coworker, fellow students, a neighbor, all people we have relationships with. There's certain ways that if we can focus on these, it can really help us to create more intimacy and to really have more responsibility and clarity in our relationships. The second rule of engagement is to minimize the negative. That may sound self-evident. Yeah, of course we should do less of the bad things, but it helps to really look at the research of what is negative, what makes a bad relationship, and how can we do less of that. And I think it's important just to understand what are those things that can sabotage our relationships or reduce the quality of our relationships or create more tension or fights or hurt more feelings or make people more angry or make us angry and hurt our feelings or the things that scare us. So let's explore that and what the research shows. And this is important to minimize the negative. We will never get rid of the negative. We're human beings. We're always going to do some things that aren't so positive, that are negative. But if we can be aware of it and more conscious, we can maybe balance this out a bit. So also, if we remember about evolutionary science, the way that we evolved as human beings was to really scan for negative things, to scan for threats. And early man, before we had civilization the way that we have it, there were a lot of threats to our survival, whether it was predators or roving enemy bands or not having enough food to eat. And the way we kept alive as a species is to be always looking for what might be out of the ordinary, what's trouble, what's threatening, what's scary, what's bad. We're very good at seeing the bad and not so good at seeing the good. But if we can become more aware of this bad and what doesn't work so well, we can start to recalibrate a little bit. What the studies show in positive psychology and also John Gottman's relationship research is for every negative thing we do, we need 5 positives to try to balance that off. So that's really important because we're so prone to the negative that if we can add more positives, that starts to balance things out. Because again, couples don't break up, relationships don't get ruined because of the bad things. People break up or end a relationship because there's not enough good. So keeping aware of this, that okay, for every bad thing I do, every defensive remark I make, every eye roll, every kind of snarky comment I make, every judgment, every contemptuous kind of criticism I have, either in my own head or one that I offer out, I need to add in 5 positives to rebalance the relationship. So let's look at what these things are to really underline them. What does the research say we should be aware of and try to not do as much of in some ways? So one of them is kind of may sound counterintuitive, is to avoiding conflict is damaging to relationships. So we should do less avoiding, which means we should actually get into more conflict. We should have more real engaged fights and work things through with the people that we're in relationship with. Learn them. Avoiding conflict, not engaging, is very damaging to our relationships because there's no possibility to resolve the tension. So that's something we need to do less of. It's damaging to relationships at work and at home. It's bad for teamwork. Another thing to kind of like, maybe someone around you in your relationship is really going to a really low level. They're maybe really name calling or criticizing or being really judgmental. Try not to sink to their level. Try not to match them at that level. You don't have to sink to other people's level, so do less of that. Another thing oftentimes we do in relationships when things are conflictual sometimes, or tension, or get a little scary, is we hide out. We isolate ourselves. We don't engage. We need to do less of that. We need to engage more. Hiding out is a problem in relationships. Another problem in relationships that we need to do less of is keeping secrets, because relationships are based on truth and realness. And if we're hiding the truth, if we're keeping secrets, if we don't really tell one another what it is that we really think, that's a problem. And so many in the couples relationship research, for example, couples lie to one another. They don't tell each other oftentimes what they need or what they want. They lie about money. They won't tell their spouse or their partner how much they spent on something. Well, those are secrets, and those can be damaging, much less greater secrets that we might have. Ideally, if we're with our friends or a loved one, if we can't be ourselves with our friends and with our partners, then what's wrong with that? It's really not okay for us. If we can't be ourselves with the people closest to us, who are we going to be ourselves with? So working toward having less secrets and more vulnerability, more disclosure, more truth in relationships is really helpful. Another thing the research finds is not just keeping secrets, but telling secrets. Telling other people's secrets, it can really damage relationships. People tell friends things in confidence and need to be kept in confidence then if that's the case. So spreading secrets is not great either. In my relationship with my husband, we have a no secrets agreement. So we've decided that we're not going to keep anything from one another. Sometimes that's hard for me. I really don't even want to tell him simple things. I don't want to tell him how much those shoes really cost, or a judgmental thought that I'm having. I don't want to tell him that. But I've decided that integrity and then that intimacy is more important to me. So I do tell him everything that I can think of that I might have been hiding from him. I bring it to the surface. I don't expect you to start out that way, but keep that as a possible goal for yourself and increasingly share more and more with one another. Another thing, we all know about this, gossip. Gossiping about other people is damaging to relationships and damaging to the people that we talk about. So to monitor that, or if you're around friends or you're at school or at work and other people are gossiping, you can do something about that. You can say, I'm not comfortable with that, or could we change the topic? Or I don't like hearing you talking about these people that way. Or I don't want anybody talking about you this way, so I'd like to stop the conversation. You may need to develop some skill to be that assertive, but I encourage you to not gossip if you keep yourself from it, if you catch yourself to stop, and to do what you can to keep people around you from gossiping. And also related to that is talking behind other people's backs. It's like you won't say something to their face, but then you go say something to other people about them. So I know many people that we coach and work with, they see if I find myself telling something to someone else about a third person, I will go right directly to that third person and tell them to their face so that I'm not spreading secrets or talking behind their back. It's a possible direction for us all to be reminded of, to go toward, to not be talking about someone else. If we have an upset with them or a judgment or something that we're talking about them, take it to the person directly, not to other people. Another negative we are all guilty of is being checked out, being kind of zoned out in our smartphones, kind of disengaged, not listening. Human, it's going to happen sometimes, but be aware of that and bring yourself back to be present. Oh, how about complaining? How many of you around your friends and they're complaining, oh, this is terrible and whatever, or complaining about, oh, my boyfriend did this and my friend did that, or my boss is such an idiot. Watching that kind of complaining is something for us to watch. If something upsets us, if we can learn to be more direct and go to the person directly to solve it. So these are the kinds of things, and complaining can be can really build. And it can build, some of these things can build to what John Gottman calls the 4 horsemen, the things that are really deadly to relationships. And I bet if I say these, you're going to notice these in yourself or people that you know. I am guilty of them all, so let's be aware of those. The first one is withdrawing, isolating, stonewalling. What I mean by that is that you just won't engage in the conversation, or someone's trying to get you to talk about something and you won't. Or you walk away from the conversation, or you get kind of stony and silent. Withdrawing and stonewalling is very damaging to relationships. That's the first one. The second one is one I'm terribly guilty of. I'm getting better, but it's being defensive. So when someone says something to you or gives you feedback, you defend yourself. No, I didn't mean that, or I didn't really do that, or counterattack someone, or give a rationalization or justification for it. And that's to try to protect yourself, but you defend yourself by pushing away the communication. You push away the feedback and gives no satisfaction to the person that you're doing this to. My husband's a very truthful person, a truthful man, and he gives me very accurate feedback about myself. I don't often like to hear it because I want to be thought that I'm nicer than that, or that's not me. But it really is. I'm human. And oftentimes I fight the message and I try to kill the messenger rather than to really allow myself to hear that and to respond to the truth of it. Defensiveness can really drive people apart. So withdrawing, stonewalling, defensiveness. The third one is that can also include, defensiveness can include passive aggressiveness, really just not saying something to someone's face, but not really doing what they're asking as well. And the third one is withdrawing and defensive is being critical. And isn't just critical of someone's behavior, but critical of the person. These can be very damaging. It hurts, and it's hard to feel dismissed in that way. And criticisms can build to the fourth one, which is contempt or disgust. And those, as you can tell, when someone has contempt or disgust for you, it's very painful. It hurts. It's hard. This has like a little hostility in it. It can include just things like eye rolling, or shaking your head, or however you show kind of dismissing, or just whatever. Those kind of dismissing comments can be hurtful, or it can be attacking. So, and also what happens with this oftentimes when we feel that kind of contempt or disgust, we can have a very upsetting emotional reaction. We can get really scared or angry, and our heart rate can go up, and we can get what we call a high physiological arousal rate. Your heart's beating and you're upset, and whether you're the one that's being the contemptuous one or the one who's receiving that. And what happens when we get that high physiological arousal state, our perceptions get distorted. So when you get really angry or really scared with someone and your body is running through like this, what happens is that we miss 50% of the good that's going around us. We also, if something's neutral, we code it with negative. So we start seeing the world very darkly when we're all jacked up like that, when we have this high physiological arousal rate. So check it. If your heartbeat is over 100 beats a minute, and you're not running or jogging or working out, then you're in one of these states, and don't trust your perceptions then, because we don't see the world correctly. We start to assume ill will. People start to look like enemies to us. People look worse than they are. So be really aware of that. Be careful of that one. So all of these is kind of hard to think about all these ways, and I'm sure if you're like me and you're honest, you can see you've done many of these things, and we always will. We are human beings. We will be defensive. We'll, have a dismissing comment. We might have a judgmental thought that we either voice out loud or just even our own heads. That's part of being human. But to watch that and to try to be aware of it and to diminish that So we can also focus on adding more positives is really important in a relationship. So these kinds of things are really helpful for us. So just think, we can't fight all of these, but we can add more positives and it can start to neutralize it. And once we do become more aware, once we do kind of clean things up, keep it clean. Don't let it accumulate anymore. And of course, you're going to have judgments and things are going to bother you about the people in your life. That's understandable. There are skills in the rest of the Heart of the Fight book that teach you how to deal with those upsets and those judgments. But if you can learn to dismiss the behavior, but not the person, to really be able to, not just what you say, but watch how you say things. Eye rolls, hostile humor, sarcastic jokes can be just as hurtful as some really straight-cutting remarks. And to really look at what you're really yearning for in relationships. Oftentimes when we react with the negatives is because our yearnings have not been met. We're hurt, we don't feel seen, we don't feel heard, we don't feel understood, we don't feel like we matter, and we counter with these kind of unconscious reflexive responses. If we can look under what was underneath that eye roll or that defensive comment or that negating way I was, what was I really yearning for? Oh, I didn't feel understood. So rather than dismissing the person, take responsibility to be understood, to get those needs met, to meet those yearnings, and then we don't have to just push the life away in that way. So rule number 2, minimize the negative. And remember, always accentuate the positive. We can neutralize this and bring more joy and more satisfaction and more connection and fulfillment in our lives. We'll never get rid of the negative. We shouldn't. We need the negative to actually bring awareness to some of the pain and hurt and what's really bothering us underneath. It helps us to see that if we use the information and don't just keep dumping it on one another. Use the information. Be more truthful with what it is you need and want. Minimize the negative, accentuate the positive, and bring more love and satisfaction in your life. Remember, we won't get rid of the negative. We don't need to. We're human. That's there. But to learn how to express ourselves more truthfully, more honestly, more directly, that's the direction to go in. So again, not just dumping that on our friends and our family or upset, but what is it that we really care about? What is it that we yearn for? And saying that directly and responsibly instead. So don't worry about being to all the negatives, but be aware so we can reduce it bit by bit, but also adding more of the positives so that we can balance things out and build a firmer foundation for our relationship so we can weather the tough times. So being aware of these things can really help. Don't make yourself wrong, don't judge yourself for it, but just try to minimize it, reduce it, redirect that energy toward what it is you really need and what you want and what you desire deep in your heart. Adding on more of the positives, minimizing the negatives, now we're bringing a beautiful equilibrium to our relationships. The foundation to be able to build more intimacy and also be able to weather and cope with the difficult times. This is what brings more intimacy and satisfaction and joy and love in all of our relationships. And I wish you more of that, accentuating the positives and minimizing the negatives for more depth, connection, fulfillment, and love in your life.